I was always a gamer. Um, and so I specifically, you know, I've played many different kinds of games and I enjoy many kinds of different kinds of games. But specifically, I'm talking about video games. Um, growing up, uh, it was still a time. The most of my childhood, or a good portion of my childhood, was pre-internet, or at least pre-internet for the general household, general consumer. Um, so I started, of course, with things like my friends had Nintendos, and at a certain point, our household got a Sega Genesis. Um, but that's not really the kind of gaming I'm necessarily talking about. I mean, that plays into it, but when I really sort of considered myself to become a gamer, because early on I didn't have a Nintendo of my own, and I had friends who would spend hours and hours and hours playing Nintendo, so they got very good at all that. And by the time I kind of get into the console world, you know, it had kind of somewhat passed me by. At least that's sort of how I thought about it. But eventually, what I was much more into was computers and computer gaming. Um, there were a lot of games and I should mention, when I say I was a gamer, um, I think there's at least a couple different classifications of gamers, right? There are gamers who play many different games. So a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I've known over the years, they will pick up whatever the newest game is that has come out. At least when it was a little bit more linear and easy to do that, and they would play through it and they would beat that game, and then they would wait for the next game, and so on and so forth. I didn't really do that so much. I was more the guy that I'd pick up a game, maybe I would play it for a day straight, then kind of lose my attention span and never come around to beating it. I didn't beat a lot of games. What I did instead was I would take deep dives into specific games. And really, ultimately, what did it was more online games, or games that had some sort of multiplayer factor, or some sort of uh, what eventually became massively multiplayer online role playing games, those kinds of things. So, for instance, Ultima Online was one that I dove really deep into for a long time. Warcraft 3 and its expansion, a real time strategy game, big multiplayer component, played a lot of that. Dragon Realms was a text based game, again, multiplayer, role playing game sort of thing, fantasy setting. And for a while, I would really mostly focus on MMOs when they were, a dime a dozen. I played many of them. The ones that I kind of actually spent time on were primarily Ultima, Dragon Realms. There was a Warhammer one for a while I really liked. The first Guild Wars was really fun. The Diablos, which were kind of similar in a lot of ways. Some other ones that a lot of people really got into, like World of Warcraft, wasn't really ever my thing. I don't know. I tried many times to enjoy World of Warcraft. It just never did it for me. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that I typically did. They were fun. They were multiplayer. And particularly if you grew up like during the time that I did, where the internet and the web really came into fruition, at the general household level, this stuff was like a miracle, right? The ability to sit down at your computer and play a multiplayer game with a friend, whether it was a competitive one or a cooperative one or whatever, seemed like magic at the time. Compared to the general experience, which is, you had them over your house or you go over their house, you'd sit down with two controllers and play, a cartridge game that once you turned it off, it didn't save or anything. This whole idea of like these large worlds that you could save your state and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but then a weird thing happened as I got into grad school. And by the way, I played heavily these types of games all the way through high school and college, and then I got into grad school, And kind of a funny thing happened. I sort of tapered off for a while. Now, some of this was due to time constraints. I was when I went to grad school, I significantly shifted what I was doing in terms of a discipline. And so I really kind of dove into my grad school studies to kind of master that craft to the best of my ability. And I took on some contract work to get even more well versed in it, and so on and so forth. So I didn't have a ton of time to play. I didn't have time all of a sudden to dive into big MMOs and that kind of stuff, the things that I really enjoyed. Or if you're used to playing, again, I would play a lot of real-time strategy games, but you have to play a lot of reps with them to stay sharp and good. So I kind of faded a little bit. And then as I kind of got out of grad school and I was, doing other things with my life, I kept trying to come back to gaming. And sort of a funny thing happened. It all kind of coincided with the times where DLC and sort of more pay to win style gaming, and you could no longer just go out and either buy a $50-$60 game and get the full game. You couldn't really do that anymore. And you couldn't really just pay an easy monthly subscription like $10 a month or whatever and have full access to a game anymore. It was the crescendo in microtransactions and all these things. And I feel like not just that, but the gameplay suffered, right? I think games became very, very grindy. So you kind of had these big AAA console games that I know a lot of people really enjoyed, and I know I'm jumping around in terms of timeline a lot here, but things like Red Dead Redemption and, other kind of bigger AAA games that people really enjoy. But remember, that was never really my style of gaming. I liked these more multiplayer based, almost subscription role-playing style kind of things. And they sort of suffered over time. They became grindy. I even tried going back to some of the greatest hits, like I tried getting back into, what would Ultima Online be like these days? Or, once again, I gave some runs on like World of Warcraft, and it didn't feel the same. Some of that magic was gone. I think that was part of it. But also I do believe that some of this gameplay has gotten worse over time. And I think that's a shame. And one thing that was an exception during all of this period of time was there was a couple year period of time where I picked up and dove pretty hard into League of Legends. And it's almost a mixture, right, of the things I've described, where it has almost role-playing game-esque aspects where you're this character and leveling them up through the course of the game. It's also very much real-time strategy based. So it was kind of it almost worked perfectly for me, firing a lot of cylinders. But even that, when I first started playing it, again, yes, it was a lot of microtransactions and stuff, but it was very geared around, it was simple. If you wanted to buy aesthetic skin kind of stuff, you would pay with the premium currency that existed in the game. Other things you could kind of grind your way through and pay for with gold if you wanted to buy more characters or whatever. I came back to that game several years later after kind of stopped playing, taking a hiatus for a while. And it had all shifted. It was also complicated. So just getting into the interface, it felt like a job. And I just wonder about these things. I wonder, what kind of happened along the way? Was it that did the gaming really change? Did I grow up and lose interest? Did I skip significant periods of time that it was just too late to get back into it in a significant way? I've done some mobile games too. For instance, I got really, really into, let me start over here. It's my opinion that gaming has gotten worse. That it is no longer what is good for the gamer or what's fun for the gamer. It's just about how much can you pull out of them, how addicted can you get them, and then how much resources and money can you pull from it. And an example of this would be I played a lot of Clash Royale on mobile. Really interesting micro level, easy to play, fun to play, deep gameplay, little, essentially real time strategy game that you could take on the go with you and all that. As it started and ramped up, again, you could dump money into it, but you didn't necessarily have to. Or if you dumped a little bit of money into it, you could kind of, get what you needed to play the game. Again, very surprisingly deep gameplay for such a small little mobile game that seems so simple on its face. But ultimately, it went the same way. It went the same direction of eventually that world was able to, or, the company sunk its teeth in to the player, and you get in kind of a chokehold. I know I'm mixing metaphors, but you get to a point where the game is so grindy to do it without paying exorbitant amounts of money. And I do mean exorbitant. You could know there was a period of time where if you paid $10 a month, it's kind of like the old subscription model. You could pay $10 a month, you get a bunch of perks out of it. It was kind of this monthly pass kind of thing. And that was fine. You could really make a lot of progress in your account and play a lot of great games. And then that kind of went by the wayside, and you could no longer do that without spending extremely large amounts of money. So I wonder, and this is a question for anyone out there, if you have an answer to this or suggestions, get in touch. What's happened? And am I in the wrong spot? Am I looking for games in the wrong places? Again, what did I enjoy? I enjoyed kind of role-playing aspects of games. I enjoyed strategic components to games. I enjoyed multiplayer, open world with other people kinds of experiences, but not ones that I always feel like they're trying to take more from me. And not necessarily games that are just designed to be nothing but dopamine systems, right? Dopamine delivery systems. So what is the answer to this? Have I just gotten, am I just old and grumpy? Did I miss my chance? Are the games actually worse? Are they somewhere else? Is indie games the way to find things? That's a whole world that I've barely explored. In part, I don't know, just because there seem to be so many of them. So yeah, I would be curious to hear from anyone where one is supposed to turn if they grew up thinking themselves as a gamer and then has suddenly found that they have a very hard time within that ecosystem these days. Any similar experiences out there? Please share. I'd love to hear.